Hello and welcome. My name is Megan Lovett and I serve the Boston College School of Theology and Ministry as Director of Continuing Education. Thanks to each of you for joining us for a special Spotlight on Ministry webinar. As part of the school's mission, we offer an array of enrichment opportunities to foster Christian faith and promote lifelong learning. We do this by offering presentations such as this one, as well as online courses, videos, podcasts, and other resources for personal enrichment and professional development. Our winter STM online Crossroads courses are now underway. Our next cohort of courses start today, February 10th, and include the course Lent 2021, Reflecting Together, and Sacraments, the Fabric of Catholic Life. The Lent course offers the opportunity to read and reflect on the Sunday readings during the first 5 weeks of Lent. The course features homilies from Catholic Women Preach and reflections by Jamie L. Waters from America Magazine. The Sacraments course examines how each of the 7 sacraments integrates the Christian community, empowers us for the mission of discipleship, and brings us into union with Christ. Don't miss your chance to enroll in these popular courses. We have a few spots left. We are currently accepting enrollments in all of our spring courses. If you're interested in learning more about our online courses or would like to enroll in a Crossroads course, please visit our website, bc.edu/crossroads. We've included a link in the chat. Thanks to our speaker for granting us permission to record today's webinar. As soon as the recording of today's presentation is available for viewing, likely within a month, we will notify all registered participants of the availability of the recording. At the end of the presentation, there'll be an opportunity for question and answer. Please feel free to enter a question into the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen at any time during the presentation. We will try to get to as many questions as possible. Finally, 2 technical pieces of housekeeping for our attendees. Today's presenter will be using slides. At any point of the presentation, you are able to click on the box that shows the speaker and move it to different sides of your screen. As our speaker shares his slides, feel free to adjust the placement of the speaker box so you don't miss anything. We are also able to offer live closed captioning for today's webinar. Please click on the closed captioning button on the bottom of your screen to enable the feature. Many thanks to Carolyn, a graduate student here at the STM, for providing the closed captioning for us today. Now I have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker. Anthony Vinciguerra is a graduate of the College of the Holy Cross and the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California. The majority of his studies have focused on addressing issues of religion, poverty, and sustainable development, both in a Christian and interfaith context. Anthony served for 14 years at St. Thomas University as the coordinator of their Center for Community Engagement. The center functioned as the primary support unit for engaged scholarship at the university, integrating Catholic social thought across the curriculum while leveraging university teaching and research into both regional and international social concerns. Anthony is currently pursuing a PhD in theology and education here at Boston College, with a focus on the intersection of theological ethics and engaged scholarship in Catholic higher education. While studying at Boston College, Anthony also serves as research advisor for University Initiative of the Association of Catholic Colleges and Universities, as well as director of the Archdiocese of Miami / Port-de-Paix, Haiti, Global Solidarity Partnership, a collaboration that leverages university teaching and research into long-term social and economic development projects in Miami's sister diocese of Port-de-Paix, Haiti. Welcome, Anthony. We look forward to your presentation.
Thanks so much, Kara. And thanks everyone for being here today. I feel honored to be part of the presentation and the good work of STM's Continuing Ed. I'm going to share my screen here. Great. So the presentation today is about Catholic social thought, engaged scholarship, and direct trade. Now, before I start, I want to say that those 3 themes, Catholic social thought, engaged scholarship, and international trade, those are topics that people spend their entire life studying, especially here at a place like BC. We've got scholars that spend entire careers looking at Catholic social teaching. We have people in our Lynch School of Education that study engaged scholarship, how universities connect with their communities to make a difference. And then we have people in our economics department studying trade issues and justice and trade issues. So these are topics that people spend their entire lives studying just one. And I think I've got about 40 minutes to try to cover all 3. So just to say, I'm going to be talking in broad strokes today, very basically, and just want to say I won't be able to cover everything, but I do hope to be able to share a bit about the intersection of those 3 elements, and particularly in Catholic higher education. And so my second quick comment is this. I know that not everyone today is necessarily working at a university. Many of those on probably are, and either students or faculty or staff at different Catholic universities, but some of you might not be. Some of you might be at a Catholic parish or perhaps at a Catholic school. So I'd just like to say those of you that might not be working in higher ed at a college or at a university, feel free to, anytime I say university or higher education, you can just swap out parish or community or even just school or group of people. So just wanted to say that before I go ahead. Even though we're talking about these big issues, really, it's just one question I want to start off with. What does it mean to be a Catholic university or a Catholic school or a Catholic parish? What does that mean? So I'm going to ask all of you just for a second to grab a pen, a piece of paper, something, your phone. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. What does it mean to you for something to be a Catholic institution? Go ahead and write it down for a second. When you think of a Catholic university, when you think of a Catholic parish, a Catholic school, what images come to your mind? What does it mean to be a Catholic institution? According to a recent UN report, across 107 developing countries, about 1.3 billion people, 22% of the human population, live in what's called multidimensional poverty. That means that about 1 in every 5 people in the world today, 1 in every 5 people, live on less than $1.90 a day. It means they don't have enough food to eat. They don't have access to health care. They don't have access to education, clean water, quality work, or live under the threat of violence. 1 in 5 people. At the same time, the inequality between the rich and the poor has been growing dramatically over the last 40 years. Data shows that the top 1% of the world's population currently own almost half of the world's wealth. Since last year, the global COVID-19 pandemic has made the situation worse. A recent report that says from March of 2020 to December of 2020, so just last year, global billionaire wealth increased by 3.9 trillion, while low-income workers lost earnings by about 3.7 trillion. We see this inequality here in the United States, and we see it globally. Currently, 26 people in the world, 26 human beings, have more wealth than the bottom half, over 3.5 billion people in the world. A UN report that came out last year says that currently the despeciation rate, that is the rate that species, insects, animals are going extinct in the world, is on par with the most destructive ice ages in the history of the planet. Climate change is growing rapidly. Last year was tied for the hottest year since they started recording global temperatures in 1880. And the last 7 years have been the warmest 7 years ever on record. Plastic pollution since 1980 has increased over 10 times. Global climate change and destruction of the environment are threatening not only species, but even our own lives. The UN Secretary General recently said, quote, "To put it simply, the state of our planet is broken." Finally, amid all these challenges and difficulties, we're some of the most divided that we've ever been. Here in the United States, analysts say they haven't seen this type of political division in the United States since the US Civil War, despite all the challenges we face. So what does it mean to be a Catholic university, a Catholic institution in the world today? That's really the only question I wanted to talk about today. What does it mean for us to be people of faith and institutions committed to a faith tradition in light of these issues? And this isn't a new question for Christians, for Catholics. It's something, in fact, we've been reflecting on since before Jesus was alive. That is the question of, who are we as people? What's most important to us? What's our understanding of God, of the ultimate reality, of why we're here? And how does that inform how we live every day in our lives? How are our deepest beliefs about what we call God, what we call ultimate in our lives, what really brings meaning, and how does that inform our choices every day in light of the world around us? That is really what we're talking about when we discuss Catholic social tradition or Catholic social teaching. A reflection on who we are, our community's experience of God, whether it's from the scriptures, whether it's from the examples of the saints, of the lived lives of people like St. Francis, Dorothy Day, even people who technically weren't part of the Catholic Church, Martin Luther King, Gandhi. They've all informed the Catholic social tradition, an ongoing tradition of reflection about our lives and how they relate to the issues of the world. And also, of course, reflects in what's called the encyclical tradition of the church, that is the written formal documents of the church's teachings on the Christian faith in light of the world. This is how the Vatican and the church currently defines Catholic social teaching or Catholic social tradition, a careful reflection on the realities of human life, all of these issues we're talking about in society or our own communities, and globally, in light of our faith and the church's tradition, in light of our experience of God, really, and what the Christian community said about that throughout time. Now, when we talk about Catholic social teaching and Catholic social tradition, of course, it speaks to us as individuals. What are our own choices? But it also speaks to us as institutions. How do we, as communities, take this faith commitment, take these deepest held beliefs, and put them into action in a critical awareness and critical concern and thinking through the issues of our world in light of our deepest commitments, in light of our faith? And Pope St. John Paul II, in his Apostolic Constitution on Catholic Universities, Ex Corde Ecclesia, this is like the defining document on Catholic education. He had this to say. So the gospel, interpreted in the social teaching of the church, is an urgent call to address these social issues, the development of people who are suffering hunger, misery, endemic diseases, ignorance, those who are looking for a wider share in the benefits of civilization, those who themselves are aiming purposefully at their own complete fulfillment. And since this is the gospel call, every Catholic university, every Catholic institution feels responsible to contribute to the same work for good. The same gospel call we have all of as individuals to engage our world, we have as institutions, we have as educational institutions. And so that's what we're talking about today. How do our educational institutions, rooted in that same faith tradition, bring to life that social mission? How do we make that happen? Because it's easy to say, right? But in light of these global issues, these huge concerns, what can really be done and how can that be done? So that's what the field of engaged scholarship is about. Whether we talk about it in the context of Catholic higher education or Catholic schools or even secular schools, secular universities, the question of engaged scholarship is all about how educational institutions relate to their wider communities. And there's been enormous changes in the field of engaged scholarship over the last 30 or 40 years so. And I'll go through those real quick. It's a shift that many people describe as a shift from a service approach to a learning approach to an engagement approach. The first approach, a community service approach, is probably what many of us are familiar with. A Catholic university having community service programs, perhaps a spring break immersion where people go to work in Appalachia or go to clean up beaches someplace, or perhaps volunteering in a soup kitchen after school or on the weekends. And this is great, of course. It gives people hands-on experience in the community. And this really in the United States came to the fore in the 1960s, 1970s with either community service or campus activist movements or faculty activist movements working and doing research for community partners. But the critique of it after a while is that it was really peripheral to the educational work of the institution. And one of the things that scholars started noticing is that students were implicitly being taught that there were sort of two parts of their educational experience. On the one side, you had the learning in the classroom, how you're preparing for your life, whether you're preparing to be a biologist, an accountant, or a teacher. And then you had this other part of your life where you volunteer and you help the community. But that wasn't really what the schools are hoping for, right? And particularly in Catholic higher ed. It's not that we want people to think that you're going to have your life and your career during the day, and then in the evening you might do something nice. The deeper question is really, how do we use whatever we do, as a teacher, as a biologist, as an accountant, to make a difference in the world? How are you going to use that out of your deepest commitments, perhaps out of your faith commitment, to address some of the pressing issues of the world? So there was a critique of the community service approach. It was often separate from the learning, really the main job of an educational institution. And it also perpetuates sort of a one-way relationship with the community. People volunteered or did work when they had time. They gave a little bit and they went back to their regular life. So beginning really in the 1980s and moving ahead, there's a shift to what's been called a service learning approach. And this is when classes or programs were developed at schools and at universities to try to connect academic coursework to community problems. So the typical example that many of you are probably familiar with is there's a class where the teacher teaches the course material, and it could be in anything. Often it was in theology, but it could have been in political science and sociology, anything. And the course is taught and students need to go out and do some type of service in the community for a certain number of hours, maybe 5-10 hours a week. And they come back to the classroom and they reflect on it and say, well, in light of what I'm studying, where do I see those kind of social issues playing out in the community that I'm serving in? And this was great because finally universities were starting to connect what's happening in the classroom to issues going on in the world. Often those would be, as I mentioned, placed in a class, in a course, or perhaps in a program, or many universities develop centers for service learning. It's something that most Catholic universities in the United States have right now. And again, this is great because finally students were able to get their hands on working in communities connected to what they're studying in the classroom. But again, as scholars do, they sort of started reflecting on it and saying, is this really what we want to be doing? Is this the best approach? Because the challenge was mostly community partners, the organizations that the universities were working with, started asking things like, well, is this really helping us? We have students come and volunteer for these 10 hours, and sure, we have them help out a little bit. What is this really accomplishing? And universities had a hard time answering that question. We send students to 100 different organizations, and we did 1,000 hours of service. But did anything change? We might say we had students working on low-income housing or working at soup kitchens. Was homelessness getting any better? Was there any better housing for people? Did wages change? Did anything really improve in the environment? It's hard to measure when you've got hundreds of students working at dozens of different organizations, usually just for a semester, for a small period of time. And the critical question that was asked was, who is this really serving? Is this really making a difference in the community? Or is it really mostly for the students themselves, for their own learning and growth, which is okay, but wasn't really the kind of mutuality and some that universities claim to be working for. And some community organizations started saying, look, if this is really about educating your students, we should be getting paid. This is really more about you, the university, and giving your students experiences than helping us address real problems that we have in our communities. In the worst cases, scholars, this is from Stoker and Tyron in 2009, they said, there's really growing dissatisfaction, quote, particularly when it comes to the issue of whether service learning truly serves communities. In the worst cases, poor communities end up feeling exploited as free sources of educating students. Other scholars studying this say that in the worst cases, these programs could be patronizing or colonizing. They can cement structures of power and privilege as students fly in from their wealthy university, dip their toes in to help a community, then go back to reflect on it. They say simplistic, charity-focused versions of this kind of service learning that focus really just on individual relationships, just themselves working in a community with no attention to the broader institutions creating the social problem, can cement those types of approaches to community issues that never really change anything. John Saltmarsh, who's sort of one of the leading scholars in this field, says that without a focus on the processes and purposes of engagement, you're not going to redefine what it means for a university to be in the community. There's going to be no change on the role that universities play. Ernest Boyer said, what's needed is not just more programs, not just more service learning programs, but a larger sense of mission, a clarity of what is the university's role in the community? What does the university exist to do? So without going on too long on this, that's what the field of engaged scholarship is about. It's a shift from having classes and programs to actually getting something done in the community. Instead of saying, we're going to spend 10,000 hours working on homelessness, the question becomes, how do we address homelessness in the community? Barbara Holland, who's a scholar in the field of engaged scholarship, says that it's a shift from talking about doing something. No, let's say how she said this. She says the shift to engaged scholarship is a shift away from saying engagement is something we do to the way we do something, right? Mary Beckman says it's a shift in the unit of analysis. Are you just studying a class in a community organization over a semester, or are you shifting what this university can accomplish on a social problem in the community? So if you think of an issue like cancer, no serious research institute would ever say, well, we spent 100 hours researching cancer. Aren't we great? No, the question is going to be, what did you accomplish? What did you find out? What difference were you able to make? But strangely enough, universities don't tend to do that when they work on social problems in the community. They do tend to say, we spent 10,000 hours working in the community without any real attention on what was accomplished. What were the community's issues that they raised? And how did the university serve the community to address one of these pressing problems? They call it an ontological question. Really, what is the role of the university? Is it there to serve the academy just to create more knowledge? Or is it there to make a difference in the world while you're forming people? Okay, I think I've hit this pretty well. That's sort of the shift from service to service learning to engaged scholarship. This is how we define engagement today, sort of in the field of higher education, a collaboration between universities in their communities for a mutually beneficial exchange of knowledge, back and forth learning in a context of partnership and reciprocity. How do universities work with their communities to make a difference? So I'll move this ahead now. Why do universities do this type of engagement? First of all, there's pedagogical benefits. You know, all sorts of research has shown that students learn better when they're engaging in communities, and particularly minoritized students that might not have had the same academic background, really learn better when they're working on a concrete problem, a social issue in the community. Then, of course, there's the theological and philosophical reasons like we just mentioned. For Catholic universities, it's part of who we are. It's part of our faith tradition, what it means to be a believer in this person, Jesus, to engage the world to make it better. But also has philosophical implications. How does a university create knowledge? Is it something that just comes out of a lab or out of the classroom or the library, or is it really created together with a community in collaboration? And finally, there's been all sorts of studies on institutional benefits for this. Students tend to stay at universities when they're engaged in something meaningful in the community. And of course, there's all the public PR, visibility, recruitment that comes from universities naturally showing it making a difference in the world. People are attracted to that. So what kind of engagement happens? And again, I'll go through this quickly. The shift has really been to curricular engagement. That means tied to the learning of the university in its research endeavors. So whether it be research projects between faculty, students working together with a community organization, internships that are happening, entire courses like service learning classes that are focused on a community issue. You can also have pieces of classes that just have a unit that focuses on a community issue. And you still, of course, have co-curricular or volunteer experiences. But there's also institutional partnerships, right? Where's the university buying its good from? Who is it hiring? Where is it sourcing its produce from? Is it from a mass industrial farm, or is it a local or inner city garden? Where is it buying, purchasing? Who's it hiring? How does it affect the communities around it? And really, beyond that, in engaged scholarship, the question is, how are all of these mechanisms not spread out into 100 different partnerships where you're never going to measure or be able to make any real change, but how does it focus into specific partnerships focused on particular issues that are identified by local communities to make a difference? So this has been a lot of theory. These are some of the key books. This is early on service learning books that many of you might already know. This is sort of a turn to the critical eyes of service learning. These are some of the two most recent texts that really talk about all service learning, all community engagement being global, collaborative learning in the world. For those of you that want to learn more about it, there's academic journals that study this every month, amazing peer-reviewed work. There's conferences happen both within secular, private, public, higher education, as well as within Catholic universities. So I'm going to move ahead here because we're getting out of time. And I'm going to move on to my sort of second part of the presentation. And this is just a case study of one engaged scholarship collaboration that I've been really lucky to be a part of. So I'm going to move here from Boston down to where I am currently due to the pandemic here in Miami, Florida, and talk about my work at a small Catholic university in Miami, or a number of small Catholic universities down here in Miami, and our relationship with Miami's sister diocese of Port-de-Paix, Haiti. So where this story begins is about 40 years ago. About 40 years ago, dead bodies started washing up on the shores of South Florida. These dead bodies were Black, and they were from Haiti, from the Northwest Department of Haiti. For those of you that know Haiti, the Northwest Department is the one closest to the Bahamas and where most folks leave from to the United States. The Archdiocese of Miami sent representatives to Haiti to say, what can we do to stop these folks that are risking their lives to come to the United States? What can we do to live out our faith commitment and to address this issue? And the bishops of Haiti said, if you really care about this issue, you should go to the Northwest Department, this Diocese of Port-de-Paix, to try to look at the key reasons of extreme poverty in the poorest region of what's the poorest country of the Western Hemisphere, to see what you can do about it. So that relationship was established, and for 40 years, there's been dozens of sister school partnerships and relief efforts happening in the northwest of Haiti. But it still is the poorest region of Haiti and still has extreme challenges. The vast majority of people live on less than $1 a day. There's no public running water, no public sanitation, diseases like cholera and malaria are endemic. Very few people have above elementary school education level. So the question I was working at a Catholic university, this is back in about 2003, and our question, we're an archdiocesan university, part of the archdiocese, we had no relationship with our own sister diocese. The question was, how do we engage these big issues? How do we make a difference as a university in those types of challenges, and particularly in our sister diocese? So we started traveling there. It's a beautiful place. For those of you that have been to Haiti, you know this. It's incredibly gorgeous, pristine, natural environment. We spent about 3 years traveling to Haiti and established what's called the Archdiocese of Miami Port-de-Paix Global Solidarity Partnership. The question was, how can the universities and other educational institutions of South Florida partner in a meaningful way with the Diocese of Port-de-Paix? And after 3 years of visiting and just talking to church leaders, community-based leaders, they said three things. They said, first of all, if you want to work with us, it has to come from us. They said the history of Haiti is of outsiders telling us what to do, whether it be colonial governments or whether it be dictators, or now it's NGOs and nonprofits coming in telling people, you need a water project, you need to be replanting trees. They said if it's outsiders telling us what to do, we're never going to change and build our own future for our own country. And people won't take ownership of it. It won't be empowering or build what's called civil society. And we agreed. We said, that's great. We want to be in something, part of something that comes from the local community. And that's part of our faith tradition, accompaniment, solidarity, subsidiarity. Also, they said it had to be something focused on long-term development. They said we have lots of support whenever there's a hurricane, whenever there's a flood, and of course after the earthquake in Port-au-Prince, but very few organizations were really willing to work on what they called autosufficiency. How are they helping folks in the northwest of Haiti stand on their own 2 feet and build their own social and economic future? So we said, great, we're happy to work on that together with you. And finally, they said they wanted it to be a mutual relationship, right? They said, sure, we've got a lot of needs, but we think we have a lot to offer too. And at the time, again, I was working at St. Thomas University, this small, relatively low-funded university, shall we say. We had almost no funding yet for this partnership. And we said, well, great, we don't have all the resources. We'll do what we can do, but we'd love to learn from and with you as we try to address some of the issues happening in the northwest of Haiti. And after many discussions, 3 sort of projects came to the fore. So it was going to be really focused. The first one was coffee. They said, look, coffee's been grown in Haiti since colonial times. The two first export commodities out of the Caribbean were coffee and sugar being sent to Europe. And they said it's been here forever, but because Haiti, and particularly the northwest of Haiti, has not been developed with no roads and no infrastructure, farmers couldn't get their coffee to market at a fair price. And since farmers couldn't sell their coffee for a fair price, they were starving and they started ripping out their coffee trees. And as they ripped out the coffee trees, they deforested the mountains. And then when it rained, you'd have mudslides. And they said, we've heard of partnerships where people could get a more just price for their coffee, these fair trade partnerships, but they had no relationships with international exporters that would help them that process. So we said, great, we said, we don't know beans about coffee, but we're a small university, but we've got students studying marketing, studying business. We have faculty studying international law. We've got accounting students. We'll see how we can work with you to help get your coffee to market. Next, in areas that the Northwest wasn't growing coffee, there were artisans that were producing beautiful handcrafts. And again, we said, look, we've got students studying art management, studying business, studying accounting. We'll work with you. And finally, the third project that came up was a solar energy project. There's no public electricity in this entire region. And we had students studying, solar electricity, electrical engineering. And we said, we'll partner with you to help create some partnerships to help support leadership on the ground. So those are the three projects. I'll go through this quickly. That's the northwest of Haiti for anyone that's familiar with Haiti. And most of the work, the coffee grows in the more forested areas of the eastern part of the diocese. The artisan work was mostly in the western side, which is much more deforested and where coffee can't grow. And then the solar work was both in a little town of Beta-Hen as well as in the capital of Port-de-Paix, and still is. So how is this done? Again, how do universities do this work? Again, I'll go through this quick. I know we're running out of time. First of all, it was focused on a particular project. We weren't sending students to 5 different countries or even 5 different projects in one country, or not even in many different areas in one country. We were really focused just on these 3 partnerships, but we worked from a number of different disciplines, everything from accounting, from communications, to business, to management, to international law, to marketing, all sorts of students working in faculty, researching and working together on these specific projects. And there was all different levels of engagement. It wasn't just a volunteer experience or just a one-time research project. The question was, how do we use all of these resources into one partnership that's trying to make change? So we had research projects. We had students in plant science researching the coffee bean borer beetle that's devouring and eating up the coffee planet. So we had plant science students learning how to study plant science and make a difference. We had internships. We had business and accounting students that were helping with the import and the accounting for the coffee that was being bought and sold out of the northwest of Haiti. We had courses that were focused on this that would be developing one part of the project, maybe developing a website, or maybe studying current market prices for a particular artisan item. We'd have pieces of classes that were involved. We'd have a business ethics class that looked at one piece of this work through the lens of business ethics or political science or what have you. And then we also had volunteer experiences. We also had students that could volunteer at coffee sales or help with the sales and the marketing. And we still have all of these areas working together between different universities in South Florida and these projects. And it's been incredibly successful. The northwest of Haiti is producing coffee for one of the first times ever. This is the president of the coffee co-op. This is what coffee looks like if you've never seen it before. This is a business professor of ours at St. Thomas. These are red coffee cherries just picked off the tree. These are some of our plant science students themselves who are from the Caribbean, working with coffee farmers and researching low-cost ways to catch and trap this beetle. This is actually a PhD student of ours who graduated, who's from Haiti himself, who's going back to work with the coffee farmers hand in hand. And this was really powerful to see students themselves from Haiti or from the Caribbean working hand in hand with their partners to make a difference. These are coffee buyers we've brought to Haiti that go and test the coffee with us every year. Anyway, you could imagine. I'm going to press pause there for a second and play a quick video. So I've been talking a long time to give you a sense of this work in the farmer's own words.
Non, moi, c'est Milfort, Saint-Hubert. Moi, c'est un monde qui est engagé dans tout ça qui concerne la vie. Cocano, c'est une coopérative et café, cacao et nord-ouest, avec dans le diocèse Port-de-Paix. C'est membre fondateur Cocano et puis qui est devenu président. Difficile. café au sorti très loin et café en cerise lourd.
Exactly. So if you leave
Bi coopérative ça, c'est dans l'idée pour améliorer conditions la vie moun, pour protéger l'environnement, pour augmenter la production nationale.
Muddy one.
So if you see the wasp, it means that that's the illness because the wasp eats the worm.
Anthony Vinciguerra. I work at St. Thomas University. The university was looking at ways to support the future of Haiti. And they said, look, we've got amazing coffee, but we want to get it to the United States in a way that brings profits back to the hands of the farmers. We said, look, we don't know anything about coffee, but we'll work with you to try to get your coffee sold in the United States. And that's what we've been doing. The university helps market and distribute and sell Café Coco in the United States. We've got students doing marketing, import, communications.
My name is Crystal Doobie. I'm the communications intern for Cocano. I'm of Haitian descent, and it's a great experience to help my people market and sell their product here in the US. The coffee is great because it's 100% Arabica. It's made in a place that's untouched, and what's better than Haitians making coffee?
Moi, non pas M. Tani Selike. Je suis technicien en Cocano, un pépiniériste Cocano. Cocano est important parce que c'est un avancement pour le pays d'Haïti, surtout pour notre Est. Parce que ce café, c'est avec le paysan qu'on fait mettre les petits à l'école, faire l'éducation des petits à l'aise. Mais avec Cocano qui vient sous terrain là, c'est un espoir pour tout le monde.
We like that. A couple more questions about the drying, like if this was an area where we were drying ripe cherries. Joel Pollack, co-owner of Panther Coffee in Miami, Florida. I was invited to Haiti through the Café Cocano trip in conjunction with St. Thomas. The more I've learned about where coffee comes from, the more I really want to be close to who produces it. Because as a coffee roaster, there are link to the people who really do all the hard work. Usually they get rewarded the least. The coffee's heavy. I carry it around all day, but not as much as they do. So one of the foundations of our company is trying to stay tight with those guys. It's good to know where your coffee comes from.
Café sorti dans monde yo. Mais yo. Na tout monde ça ko toué. Mais yo.
This area is amazing. We hiked up here. It took a couple hours. It was a steep hike. The elevation here and the microclimate is really magnificent for producing coffee. I have to say that the coffee that we tasted today, the coffee that was made for us in this building right here on my left, fantastic. It had a clarity to it and a definition to it. In a way, it reminded me of super high quality chocolates where you can taste sort of the fruitiness.
My name is Gary Sananjules. I've been buying Café Cocano for the last 2 years, and our customers love it. You know, this is something that I want to support.
What makes this special on a coffee level is it's really pretty old school. It's never been updated in a technified way. It's a very sparsely planted area with a lot of opportunity. There's plenty of shade where these trees grow.
Toute zone ça c'est côté que qu'on cultiver café, mais yo vinn couper puis bois ça ou planter banane parce que yo pas de jeune marché pour café. Mais avec Cocano pas ouais, yo commence à rebraser, à planter pied bois pour yo retourner planter café. Nous pas gagner plus café que même gens que nous te qu'on gagne toujours avec Cocano. C'est un gros bagage Cocano fait pour nous-mêmes.
Moi-même moi les petits frères La Fontaine. Ça qui coopérative là, c'est toujours collaborer ensemble. Faire yon comprendre qui ça coopérative la vaut. Les fini que c'est toujours encourager moun qui a sorti à l'étranger qui a supporté nous.
We were able to offer great coffee to people in the United States, bought in a way that's traded justly, that gets fair wages into the hands of the farmers.
The coffee's from Haiti. It is delicious, aromatic, smooth, and great tasting, and also the best group of people you'd ever want to have harvest your coffee.
So that's a quick discussion of the coffee work. I mentioned that we also worked with these coffee farmers, been incredible success. For the first time in history, coffee farmers are exporting coffee in a direct trade partnership. Over 200,000 pounds of coffee have gone out. Over 300 farming families are working in this. They've won all sorts of awards. I've only got about 5 minutes left here, so I'll be quick. We've also worked with these artisans and done incredible work producing handcraft with artisan women in the Northwest. Again, with our business and management students, we'll be able to work with an incredible women's co-op that maybe a quick peek into. I'll squeeze this in if they let me. Making, among other things, handmade bags for schools. For those of you that work at Catholic institutions or schools in general, tote bags or something. These women making beautiful handmade tote bags that we're making for schools across South Florida and in all different parts of the United States, so that universities are able to say that they have a product that they're purchasing is making a difference. Their students can help sell these, but it's also empowering women in one of Haiti's poorest regions. I'm going to play a quick little piece of that, and then I'll move along and we can wrap up and bring in some questions. So here you go.
Moi, relè Francita Dumasse. Moi, continue tata, tout le monde connaît. Ou plutôt, ou travail, avec ça, ou fait, ou toucher. Parce que là où travail, le plus bon, ou doit penser. Moi, j'ai 5 petits. Moi, j'ai 13 ans, je travaille dans l'atelier. Mais c'est Nazareth, un pile patient.
Moi, je suis Véronique Vernet. Je travaille dans l'atelier de Saint-Nazareth depuis 12 à 13 ans. Moi, je fais un pile bagaille. Moi, je fais valise, tablier, tirobe, bikini, un pile bagaille. Parce que moi, je apprends, parce que depuis de l'école, moi, je suis fin l'école.
Me llamo Nazaret. Aquí en Haití soy Sena. Al llegar aquí a Jean Rabel en el 2002, tenía interés especial en trabajar con la mujer, porque la mujer es lo que dicen en creol le potomitan, o sea, el tronco de la familia es la mujer. Hay 25 señoras que trabajamos de lunes a viernes.
My name is Joel Pollack with Panther Coffee. Today I walked in and I saw a backpack, like a mini backpack made out of a black beans from North Dakota. And it was super cool. We just said, can you do that out of burlap? And they said, yeah, sure. So we got some details to iron out about the interior and the lining, but I think it's gonna be amazing. We love the fact that it's not only helping people, but it's a real story. I mean, there's sweatshops all over the world, right? And this is not that.
Li aide en pile parce que moi pas de caille, li ba moi logement côté pour moi rester et li fait un pile bagay pour l'autre madame qui gen nan nécessité, qui gen besoin. Merci à tout le monde qui a acheté parce que tout le temps m'a travail, moi yo regardé ça me fait, me travaille bien, yo acheté, moi gagne comme si toujours gagne vie toujours pour me travailler, pour bagay plus toujours.
So just to wrap this up, as you saw, all sorts of beautiful handbags from Made. We also just began a great partnership down here with Barry University and down here in Miami, where during the COVID time, the women in the atelier are making handmade masks, earning an income for their family. Barry University students are doing the marketing and selling of them. And their School of Nursing and their School of Education is working with the Diocesan Department of Schools in the northwest of Haiti. Whereas for every mask sold in the United States, another one is going to be produced in Haiti, and their education faculty and students are going to be working as well as their nursing faculty or students are working with their partners in the northwest of Haiti to get these masks out to schools in rural Haiti as part of a science education curriculum about germs and preventing COVID, which has also been an issue in Haiti as it is around the world. So this is another example of universities collaborating together with partners to address a social issue together. And I'll pretty much wrap it here. Here are a few pictures of the masks. The kids, these are the folks, they're so cute with the masks. But also, as I mentioned, we've worked on solar energy projects. I don't have time to get into this now. But so why did we do this? I'm gonna wrap up with this. Because I want to sell you coffee. No. Sure, we'd love to have you buy the coffee and support the farmers. I can send you a link afterwards if you want to buy the, or if you want tote bags. I've been trying to get BC. BC gets tote bags made. I'm not sure where. Love to have them made in Haiti, or if your own school or institution or parish would like to get bags made, we can get them made in a direct trade relationship that's empowering women and helping make a difference. But it's not about coffee or tote bags really. You know, the question is, what does it mean for us to be Catholic institutions in the world today? And how can we make a difference, really? That's what this field of engaged scholarship is about. That's what these partnerships are about. How do you make that a reality in your organization or your institution or your community? You know, as we said, there's always this question of who are we? What's our relationship, our experience of this loving God, and how does that translate into our love and our action for the world around us? And I'd like to say that's not just for us as individuals, but for us as institutions. Who are we? What it really roots us in our understandings of God or what's most important in the world, and how does that translate into our actions as educational institutions in the world? And that's really what I think all this is about. So that's about it. I'll put my contact in the chat, or if you have any interest, and that's about it. I think we'll take any questions now. Megan, is that right?
That's right. Thank you so much for your presentation. I know I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody in our audience learned a lot as well. So thank you for sharing about the great work that you are doing. The first question you touched upon about how do you go about purchasing these bags? And so it sounds like either a follow-up email to you or that you will send will be the way to go. Oh, you're on mute.
Sure, no problem. I'll drop it. If I put this in the chat, does it go out?
Yep. So you're just going to have it go to all panelists and attendees.
Okay, oops, there you go. All panelists and attendees. There you go. I put it in there. Great. So there's my contact, my email. You can order coffee. There's a link for there right online if you'd like. If you'd like to order masks or bags, you can just go to the Atelier's website and click on Contact Us and go ahead. You can either send me an email personally and I can connect you, or you can go right to the website and get information there. Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you. Another question is, how does the institution formalize support for faculty to engage in this?
Yeah, that's super, super important. And that's a whole subfield within the broader field of university community engagement. How do you incentivize this, right? We all know that faculty are busy, students are busy, administrators are busy. And there's been a lot of research done on this, that the best engagement really happens at universities that support it. But what does support it mean? right? What incentivized faculty? Well, we all know that particularly universities, it's largely about advancement in rank and about research, service, and teaching, right? Those are sort of the traditional three areas that faculty are evaluated on. And so having community engaged research or community engaged teaching or a type of community engaged service is explicitly written into the advancement in rank or promotion and tenure guidelines of universities is key. I didn't really get into it, but there's something called the Carnegie Community Engagement Classification, which is now sort of the gold standard for measuring how well universities do their engagement. Just as Carnegie evaluates universities in terms of their research effectiveness or in terms of their teaching, Carnegie also has a classification for how well a university organizes its engagement with the community. You can Google it, and it's a robust self-assessment and study of how a university does its engagement, but a really important key part of that is to what extent do the faculty themselves and administrators write in community engaged research, community engaged teaching, community engaged service as an element in the promotion and rank. Even if it's not necessary, even if it's not obligatory to do that, how is that valued? Because as we know, often in higher education, it's sort of pure research is often receives the most support. The president of the University of Minnesota recently said, however, that they were going to be a tier 1 research university, not despite their engagement, but because of their engagement, right? That their research was going to be great, not despite the fact that faculty are doing things in the community, but because their research was going to be addressing community issues. And that's really the shift that I think gives the kind of support that faculty and students and administrators need to institutionalize this kind of work. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Another question, you touched on this when you were sharing about the mask, but how has the pandemic affected the ministry that you're doing, the work that you're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's affecting the whole world. Now, unfortunately, Haiti, as I mentioned, and the northwest of Haiti particularly, has really limited medical facilities or medical access for people. So if you can imagine at the beginning of the pandemic how difficult it was to get a test here or to get access to care here, it's that much exponentially difficult in Haiti. So statistically, if you look online or you ask the Ministry of Health in Haiti, they'll say they've had very few cases, and that might be true. People may have different immunities, but working with the farmers, I was just in touch with them the other day, and quite a few of them were sick. Some were in the hospitals, and they say, we don't know, it's this really bad fever and cough that people have, and a number of people have died. And to us, it sounds like COVID, but there's no knowing. And to the truth, I hate to say this, but the truth is the kind of diseases they often deal with there, like cholera, malaria, dengue fever, can lead to death within, minutes and are much more visible, perhaps, than COVID is sometimes. And so since they haven't seen sort of those extreme responses, always that they say, well, we don't know if it's here. But unfortunately, people die of all sorts of things there and nobody knows. So it's hard to know.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I think we have time for one more, and our audience members just thank you for your presentation and for your work. And she asked, how did St. Thomas bring their engaged service into dialogue with the faith or meaning making of their students?
Yeah, it's super important. And that's key for us as Catholic institutions and how we do that, right? Lots of institutions do engagement for all different reasons. Public institutions have a public commitment. Some private universities have their mission statement. But for us, we sort of did it at multiple levels. One level was as an institution. The first question we asked ourselves wasn't, can we create a class? Or is this a faculty member's interest? Or is this a student project? First question we asked ourselves, really reflected on, was that we were an archdiocesan institution, right? And what does it mean to belong to the Catholic Diocese of Miami, the Archdiocese of Miami, and be in a relationship with our sister diocese in Haiti as people of faith, right? And to what extent do we understand ourselves to be brothers and sisters in the world? What does this gospel mean for us at the university when our sister diocese is suffering in these ways as an institution? So it's sort of like an institutional faith reflection piece. And it's included explicitly in all of our meetings. We'd be reflecting on it. We'd open our meetings with prayer. We'd share reflection on the experience that we've had, and how that informs our own lives, our own spiritual journeys. Our partners would share that with us as well. But I also want to say that not everyone, of course, at St. Thomas, like most universities nowadays, was Catholic, or many were former Catholic. And it's been an interesting thing to see how people sort of rediscover, you can call it their spirituality or their faith, whether it be Catholicism or another faith tradition, through this. Because when you're talking about people suffering in the world and sharing love in your life with others, I think you're talking about faith. Tom Broom always says that, faith, hope, charity are sort of the cardinal theological virtues, and that if it's not always explicitly about sharing faith, sometimes you go through charity, or sometimes you go through hope, but that those three will always be interrelated, is what Aquinas said. And then those three are always related, and somehow when you're sharing hope, when you're sharing charity, faith will come up, even if it's not explicitly said as that. So yes, in some ways, I would say it's definitely been a Catholic identity and a formation experience. For us, it's how we expressed our Catholic identity. I know it's how Barry University articulates it that way as well now, but it's not, even if it's not always explicit, it's often implicit, maybe even a more powerful way. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you so much. And one of our audience members just wrote, outstanding presentation, theory backed up so well with action. Thank you, Anthony, for your clarity in presenting. And so I echo that. I'm sure that we all feel that way. We're running out of time. So just want to thank you so much for your presentation, for your time with us this afternoon, if you're in the Boston area or on the Eastern Coast. And then we just want to remind our audience members, we do have more webinars. Our next one is going to be a week from Thursday on the 18th, and it starts at 6 p.m. and we will let you know in a follow-up email of how you'll be able to join that. Thank you so much, Anthony.
Thanks so much, everyone, for being here today. Take care. I look forward to being in touch.
Bye.